Hey everybody, it's Lindsay. Decided to switch up my workspace this week and work outside since it's nice and warm, but not too warm weather. So, new background, same me. Anyways, this week we are going to talk about sort of deeper trauma than just sort of the initial grief, loss, and then sort of basics of trauma that we talked about last week. This week we're going to talk about ACEs, so adverse childhood experiences, and complex PTSD, which is a culmination of sort of trauma that is acquired over childhood. So this week, first, I'm going to have you watch an overview video from Nadine Burke-Harris, who happens to be the Surgeon General for the state of California. She is one of the first Surgeon Generals for the state of California. We've always had one for the national level, but we now have one for the state level, and Nadine Burke-Harris is the first one for the state of California. She's very much invested in talking about ACEs, how they are a thing, how they contribute to later childhood sort of stuff and later lifespan related to health. And so it's a really great TED Talk. And so I would have you watch that. And then think about how does this help you sort of think about trajectory of lifelong health outcomes and other sort of things that we've been talking about in this class. ACEs are not new, but they are something that we have regained a lot of interest in about the past 5 years. When I first started teaching at Chico State, nobody was talking about ACEs, and now we're all talking about ACEs. It's become a very big thing. And so why? Why is that when they've been around for a while? Well, we've more and more done research to show how much ACEs reflect on people's health throughout sort of their lifespan, particularly within sort of their mental and emotional health. So this class is really where it is. And so when we look sort of at the scales of how these things happen, what it all points to is that it contributes to early death in people, whether it be through suicide, whether it be through heart disease. How do all those sort of things? Well, Dr. Burke's talk will tell you about those sort of things. There's some slides in the presentation about the original ACEs research, how the CDC has talked about it, where it came from, and that's all some really important sort of stuff. Next, I'd like you to look at the ACEs Too High website. It's linked in Blackboard. ACEs Too High was created by a journalist who was really interested in ACEs, and she did a lot of health journalism, and so she's contributed to this website. It sort of works as a Tumblr-esque kind of thing where she posts regular sort of stuff, whether it's related to education, juvenile justice, criminal justice, public health, other sort of things. And it's a really great place to look and see what are kind of the contemporary and new pieces of information about ACEs that are coming up. There's also a place on there where you can take the ACEs screening test to see how many ACEs you have. I also have a link on Blackboard to a copy of it, a hard copy of it, in case you wanted to print it off, give it to other sort of people. And then it has some normative information at the bottom where it talks about, who in the population, both broken up by gender, male and female, have similar number of ACEs. Some people take the ACEs screening test and then they get really overwhelmed of like, oh God, I had a really terrible childhood and that means I'm just doomed. That's not what it means. And it means just that we have to look for these sort of things to be able to overcome some of the trauma that we have lived through in our lifetime. If we don't, what often develops is complex PTSD. So the best case scenario is if something traumatic happens in childhood, we address it immediately. We work on it so that way it doesn't impact us over the lifespan. However, what we know is that most parents are doing their best, society is doing their best, but our best is really not great. And so instead, we oftentimes overlook and we don't continue to work on these sort of things. And over time, repeated traumatic events, particularly ones that happen in our childhood that create an environment of not being safe, really begins to develop into a type of PTSD called complex PTSD. There's some videos this week about complex PTSD. How does it differ from regular PTSD? And what sort of things can you do about it? And so there's some really great information. There's also an article that is linked to thinking about what is complex PTSD and what does it look like and how do we deal with these sort of things. If you are interested in reading more about complex PTSD, or if you think you might be somebody who is dealing with this, there's two great books that I like to recommend. The first one is Complex PTSD, From Surviving to Thriving by Pete Walker. This book is phenomenal. I have it. It is very much a book that talks about, what does it look like? How does it happen? What does it shape? What can you do about it? It's very good, kind of like a self-help manual. Another book that I really recommend is The Body Keeps the Score. It's by a brain researcher who he originally started in PTSD sort of research with veterans, and then he talks about sort of trauma and how our bodies metabolize it, what it does to sort of the physiology of our bodies. And it's a really great book. And so it talks a lot about just regular PTSD as well as complex PTSD and how those shape sort of and change our bodies, which is why it's called The Body Keeps the Score. So if we don't deal with trauma and if we don't deal with these sort of things, our body remembers even if we are trying desperately to forget. Okay. So, finally, today's moment of Zen is self-hypnosis. I always just like to be upfront. Some people think hypnosis is funky and weird. That's okay if you do. I like to talk about whatever is helpful to somebody is helpful for somebody. And so a lot of people do find help through self-hypnosis or through other sort of hypnosis. And so this week there is a video on self-hypnosis. The lady's a little silly and funny, but it's a good video and it gives you just sort of the first overview. There are other videos, of course, about self-hypnosis. Definitely something to try if you think that you're maybe into that. We know that hypnosis is much more likely to work on people who believe that it's going to work than people who are like, yeah, this is nothing and it's not a thing. If you're one of those people who are like, yeah, I don't really believe in hypnosis, then it's probably not for you. But if you're somebody who's like, yeah, no, I could totally get into this, it might be a great tool for you to be able to use to sort of keep your mental health and self-care together. So there are no new readings for next week. Everybody is going to get an automatic 10 points for your reading response next week. You're welcome. We're going to be doing some special stuff next week. So I just want you to have a little moment to break and catch up. And so you don't have to worry about a reading response for next week. So for the rest of this week, watch all the videos, do your class activity. Remember your support tool number 2 is due by Friday, but this weekend you got nothing to do. You can just relax. You're welcome. And I'll see you next week.